Hi, hello, hello. We are going to talk now about my top 10 anime of 2021, getting in right before my artificial deadline of you have to do all this 2021 stuff in the first month of 2022. So we did it! Hooray, hooray. This list won't be anything mind blowing or shocking if you've been watching my seasonal anime reviews. And since we already did talk about all of these shows, sometimes at very great length in those videos, this isn't going to be so much like a retrospective and summary of absolutely everything I liked about these shows, but rather just an opportunity to chat a little bit more about particular aspects or maybe things I've learned since then. And if these shows sound interesting, you can go back to the season they were featured in and see like a much more long discussion. Anyways, we're starting with Zombieland Saga Revenge in the number 10 slot. I can remember a while ago having a conversation about idol shows with a friend of mine who's very into Idolmaster. And he said, Idolmaster is better than Love Live because IMAS is full of weirdos. And something about that really stuck with me. That Love Live, I think, really does kind of aim for your generically likable moe archetypes, whereas Idolmaster really is full of some very extreme character types. And I think it kind of speaks to this merging of like the idol and slice of life genres that occurred pre-Love Live. But after Idolmaster had kind of already established itself in this other entire almost industry of idol anime, and this thinking of the weirder the characters, the better, I think makes a lot of sense to me, insofar as the structure of idol shows, the obligatory performances of the characters that some chunk of almost every episode is devoted to just singing and dancing. There's already so much time and characterization accounted for simply by having them in this situation. You already have a lot of the differentiating factors of character kind of spoken for. So you got to really go completely wild with everything else if you want to make it an interesting show. And by this logic, Zombieland Saga Revenge is kind of the ultimate idol show. And I think it is. In that, because the characters were so extreme, because they had this gimmick of them being zombies, of them being plucked from different areas and eras of history, it really added this weight, this complexity to the idol aspects of the show, such that when they got to performances, like the concert that I screen capped on the previous slide, oh my gosh, I was so moved. I was so caught up in it. It was so powerful. And the variety of the idol experience, so many dimensions of character and what performance means through the ages explored. I think that the premise of the show is just so clever, and it really speaks to the potential, I think, of in other genres, this idea of cast to the present throughout various historical eras. Wait! No, that's just fate. I just described fate. The idol wasn't first. Friggin' Eroge light novel was first. It was actually Nasu that figured out this formula. Anyways. But yeah, I think what really speaks to the quality of this show is that this is an idol show where I don't wish that it wasn't an idol show. Almost every other idol show, which I watch because I like the characters or I like the setting or whatever, almost every time I kind of think that the actual singing and dancing just gets in the way, and I wish there was like more variety in the plots and stuff. But here, I think it adds to it so much that I'm actually glad that all of this is anchored on them being idols. The secret quality of this show, though, isn't this, it's just a good idol show. And it's not even just that it's a good slice of life show, because it's a very good slice of life show too. They do have quite a lot of variety in the stories. But that it's a lore-driven mystery show. And that's really what impressed me. I think it surprised me the most for sure about this season is how much I got caught up in the actual lore of the sci-fi type mysteries lurking behind the scenes of the premise. And with the very dramatic finale, which of course I won't spoil, but holy crap. When is season 3 coming out? When is Zombieland Saga, I don't know, From the Grave or something? That's gonna be so good. Okay. Moving on, at number 9, we have the Heike Monogatari. So after I released my seasonal anime review video, I got a great comment from 4Clubs, who always leaves very good comments. They talked about how they found the direction influenced by Naoko Yamada to be really powerful, that for better or worse, they really couldn't ignore Yamada's direction. And I didn't know that Yamada directed this, because I thought she only worked for KyoAni. I thought she only did content with KyoAni right now. So I was taken off. Yeah, I thought she worked exclusively with KyoAni. But, you know, for better or worse, it has all of her melodramatic sentimental hallmarks. Once I realized and I looked back at how this is written and depicted, it was like, oh yeah, this is really obviously Yamada. The scope, I talked about this in my review, that one of my annoyances with the series, or something that it was kind of like an obstacle for me to get over, for me to really start caring about it, is that the scope kind of felt insufficient, that there was only these very quick glimpses into the life of what most of the country, most of the peasantry was experiencing at the time. And that, you know, it was kind of difficult to get caught up in it and to start caring when, you know, my leftist brain is like, all of these institutions of power are terrible. I don't really care about which one of them wins. The only sympathetic character is Biwa, because she came from poverty and she was being, you know, harassed by forces of power. But in the end, though, thinking about it from this like Yamada lens, I shouldn't have thought about this as like a historic drama instead, or a period piece, or some sort of political message about, you know, Japan at the time. Instead, it's really just a character study. It's really just about looking at these people and how they behave and how these personalities interact. Yeah, so like I complained about the lack of peasant representation, and 4Clubs commented this on as well. They said, you know, there's really not too much to say about the peasantry. They had no clue what was going on, and their lives were just sort of like causally disconnected from everything else that's happening in the sphere of noble influence. But you know, that's like very Yamada core. We were focalized through Biwa, and then at other times various members of the Heike family, and you see everything else that's happening through a glass, darkly. And what I always think of is there's a scene in Liz and the Bluebird, which I think is, you know, a fantastic film, probably my favorite animated film. And I think a really great representation of how Yamada directs. And there's a scene where Nozomi sees the main characters of the main Hibike series, Reina and why can't I think of her name? What? Anyways, she sees them through the window practicing. And that's like kind of the only time they appear in Liz and the Bluebird at all. And like just this feeling of knowing that the world is persisting at a distance, but because of how the characters are, you can't really close that gap. You can't really have the experience of what the other characters are doing and thinking in any sort of depth, because we're so focalized through this limited perspective. I always think that's really cool. I think that's like a very cool storytelling method. And that's one of the qualities of Yamada that I really like, that I think she's excellent at. And as I started recontextualizing the Heike Monogatari as like a Yamada story of people being largely ignorant of the forces around them, I don't know, I liked it even more. So yeah, this is kind of cool. Like, Science Saru for such a long time only worked on projects directed by Yuasa. Yuasa, of course, is like an absolute genius, and nobody was complaining about that arrangement. But regardless, he has stepped down as the sole creative director at Science Saru, and instead Science Saru is now taking on a variety of projects, including this, directed by someone who I also thought was quite like exclusive, but I guess is also broadening her horizons. So it really, starts to make you wonder, what else are we going to see from Science Saru? And I think we have a very, very solid foundation that the art direction and animation quality is clearly 100% still there. And I think that opportunity, that widening of scope, is really exciting as sort of a... Dude, my mind is like blanking out hard. What is wrong? Is it because I woke up recently? What the heck? Oh my gosh, I haven't felt this unarticulate in a while. Blah. Anyways, okay, so basically what I'm trying to say is that this show is very exciting because it represents so many other things that Science Saru could be doing. And obviously, they're all going to hit this quality of animation and direction. And yeah, I want to see them do anything. Any genre, working with any director, any mode, any adaptation. They're just one of my favorite studios ever, and everything they do is just so uniquely wonderful. And they already were one of the most diverse studios in terms of how much they'd change up their style from project to project. They certainly had a few like hallmark styles that they would return to. But it feels like their capability is just infinite. There's way more to come out of Science Saru. Okay, next we have Sunny Boy. I was thinking about how there's some anime that everyone kind of likes, but you would be very shocked to hear someone say, "Oh, that's my favorite anime of all time." Whereas this is kind of the opposite, where it's going to be polarizing, a lot of people it's just not going to click with. But out there, I feel very confident that this is somebody's number one favorite show. And it feels totally justified, because the premise is so unique and so complex that it could just click for someone on like 7 different levels if they liked this unique combination of genres and moods and storytelling structures. If they happen to, have that as their checklist, this is a show that could check all of those boxes. The mysteries are so rich that someone could endlessly but fruitfully explore it. Let's be real, in the latter half of the show, it's very, very hard to follow the actual lore of the series and what they're trying to accomplish and how. But you can imagine a dedicated superfan that re-studies every episode and perhaps reads various supplementary material and collaborates with other fans on the internet, really being able to break down and make sense of the systems behind the series and figure out some of the implicit mysteries that I think most of us were content with just kind of glossing over. And the characters are really well defined, really well expressed. You feel like they could resonate deeply with someone that sees themselves or their soulmate or someone on the screen in a way that no other show had provided that before. Yeah, I don't know. The character archetypes, I think, are pretty new. There's never been anime protagonists that acted quite like this, that had this quite this mood. And everything is so well produced, so compellingly directed, so masterfully animated. There's no break. There's no like, okay, well, I love this show so much, it's so uniquely me, but it's difficult to call it my favorite just because it's so sloppy in this one part, or I really don't like the soundtrack or something like that. It's hard to imagine that being a breaking point when all of it is just done so well. But, this isn't my one. My number one. There was things in this show that I was sort of like annoyed by or disengaged with. But I'll always support a show that aims to be just the small niche's number one instead of going for like a mass market appeal. There's so many opportunities this show had to be more accessible. They could have put in so much more exposition. They could have like slowed down the pace. They could have had way more like bridging scenes to explain, how you go from one event to another event. There was so much stuff they could have done to make the series more likable. They could have made the characters friendlier and more approachable and more relatable to more people. They could have made it less episodic, more explained, less tragic, more personable. Generally just less weird. In almost every situation, when they could have done it in a way that is familiar to anyone or is like just kind of recognizable and understandable right away, they instead took the weird route. And that's amazing. That's such an amazing gamble that they didn't do anything like this, even though they had so many obvious opportunities to widen the audience. Instead, they endeavored so hard just to reach... Here I should have put 0.1% of people, but I just put 0% of people so deeply, which might be even more accurate. This is a niche show that was pulled off excellently. Okay, now we're going to talk about Shadow's House. So, after this aired, I learned more and more about how much Cloverworks butchered it. The Cloverworks sentiment has been getting very, very negative, I would say, in the greater anime community. The Promised Neverland Season 2, they veered way off course from the manga and everybody hated it. They said it was terrible writing. Wonder Egg Priority was such a compelling premise. It was so masterfully produced. And then it just completely vomited all over itself with perhaps literally the worst lore and worst explanations of any anime I've ever seen ever. And then Shadow's House, everybody was very disappointed with the ending because I think the idea was they wanted to have like a really exciting climax. And with the rate they were adapting the manga, nothing really lined up. So they were like, all right, let's just write our own. And they shoveled in a whole bunch of plot points like way too early, and they rushed a whole lot of stuff. And at the time I was like, oh, this is so exciting. Like so many twists. I'm learning so much. And then after I learned that this was like an anime original ending, I started thinking about it more and more. And I'm like, yeah, that was too much. And then it started kind of like weighing on my enjoyment of the entire series. Because, you know, that's like a pretty major error. Like, can I really just kind of forgive that and be like, oh, but I still liked it? Yeah, Cloverworks. More like Clover doesn't work. Okay, here's the funniest part. Is everyone is going insane about the stupid ecchi show this season, Sono Bisque Doll or whatever, my dress-up darling. It's like all over Twitter. Everyone is talking about it. My anime watching friends are like, yeah, this is really well done. This is very well produced. But it's Cloverworks again. It's Cloverworks adapting another very critically acclaimed manga that has like a huge fan base. And once again, at the start, everybody's like, yeah, they're doing a great job. They're nailing it. They really understand how to bring the series to life. And then I bet they're going to do some other stupid anime original ending where they get to episode 11 and they're like, oh crap. The main character and the main girl haven't gone together yet. Just do it all now. And everyone's gonna get pissed off again. It's just gonna keep happening. Oh my god. Okay. I don't know. Will I ever get tricked by Cloverworks again? I don't care about watching that show, but maybe they're gonna adapt like Rojika and Rajasi. What's that series called? It's not called that. Or maybe they'll adapt like Goku or something, like really insane. And I'm like, this doesn't even make sense to adapt from a manga. But they're going to do it anyways, and they're going to trick me for like 12 episodes, and I'm going to be like, this is fantastic. And then right at the end of the 12th episode, they're going to poop all over it. Okay, we got to move on. So yeah, the last arc, it was very rushed, very weirdly disjointed, hurriedly tossing together tons of twists and info dumps. But you know, I can forgive it, I think. I can understand the pressure they must feel to restructure a manga into 12 episodes. That's a difficult task. I do kind of feel some endearing pity for Cloverworks. After Wonder Egg was such a disaster and everyone was just crapping on it after it had been this like runaway think piece generating mainstream crossover hit. People were claiming it was opening up the lines of discourse for mental health in Japan, which is just absurd, but everyone's expectations were so high and then they just completely dropped the ball. And it reminds me of that skateboarding meme where have you seen this, where the first panel is someone just like walks up, I think they like step on a rake and it hits them, and then the second one is someone does like a cool skateboard kickflip into grind down the railing, and then they just land on the rake and it hits them in the face. Cloverworks is like that. They go to such length, such effort. They really, like, they do more effort than if they didn't screw it up, because they keep writing stuff and nobody likes their writing. But they go to all this effort and then it always just smacks them in the face. But yeah, I don't know. It's starting to become kind of endearing to me. It's frustrating, but it's endearing because it's just like, guys, just stop. But, you know, the first arcs, the stuff that was actually keeping pace with the manga, was fantastic. The pacing, the brambled path of each arc, the 4 quadrants of world building a la Girls' Last Tour. This is something that I talk about a lot. I first explained it with Girls' Last Tour, that I really like series where the environment is not like our world, but it has many of the conventions of our world. And the characters are more knowledgeable about some aspects of the uniqueness of their world, but then they know less than us about the hallmarks of the real world that show up in the show. So what that creates is 4 quadrants where there's a lot of stuff that you know the significance of it, you know what this thing is, but the character doesn't. There's a lot of stuff that the character knows that you don't know, just because they're eccentricities of the world that they live in specifically, or it's something about the character's history that we've been left out of, or their relationships. And then there's a lot of stuff that neither you nor the character knows. And just the positioning of these quadrants creates like a deeper mystery in that zone where both you and the characters can't understand the significance of what you're seeing. It's fantastic. The 4th quadrant, by the way, is stuff that both you and the characters know, but that's not that interesting. The aesthetic that they have here, that kind of like creepy Victorian goth, I was never ever into it. I never really gravitated towards properties that have that. I don't like that fancy, dusty, dark and dingy, intricate Chinaware kind of stuff. Never worked for me. But here, it just really hits, I think. And this one is interesting too, that this series, I think in large part, was the inspiration for what is now a quite popular within a niche, but quite popular within that niche, communal writing sphere on Twitter. So this might take a little bit of explaining, and this video is already quite long, but whatever, this will just be a long one. So there was this person I followed on Twitter, because they were both followed by a friend of mine who plays rhythm games, and this like rationalist former math prodigy who then started tweeting about practices of like meditation and like getting in touch with your feelings and stuff. And in my mind, these two were in completely different spheres on Twitter. So the fact that they both followed and at one point both retweeted this other person, who goes by Void Angel right now, was very surprising to me. So I followed them just off the strength of that. And then since I started following them, they for a while were writing all these kind of like strange fantastical tweets about angel girls, proper care of angel girls, how to clean their halo, how to make sure there isn't litter stuck in their wings and stuff. Just this kind of intersection of taking kind of like a fantastical creature and then putting it in like a very mundane setting, with a twinge of processing mental health issues, processing trauma, processing things like addiction, that were like manifest in the personalities of the angel girls. And then this kind of provided like a roundabout way of connecting with those things, by putting it in this sort of semi-fantastical scenario. And I thought this was really interesting. I thought this was very fascinating to watch kind of evolve, and watch first this person make tweets about it, but then their friend group started making tweets about it, and then it started spreading to complete strangers that were interested in it. And then where it really took off was the addition of the second archetype to the angel girl archetype, which was the doll. And this happened after the Shadows House, which is, of course, all about girls who are dolls and girls who work as servants for the illustrious Shadows House as dolls. And the first kind of manifestation of the archetype in these tweets of the doll was very similar to the dolls in Shadows House. So it was always like, I wonder if this is all because Shadows House is airing. And then it really, really took off at that point. And now there's like a whole zoology of different entities, the demon girls, witch girls, that have this very complex relationship with each other. That they all kind of signify something to different people, but it's not at all like a prescriptivist writing community. Yeah, it's been really, really fascinating. It's not that I've like super delved into this. It's more just that I follow this one person and I see what they're retweeting and stuff. But it's like, I'm happy this sort of thing is happening, and it seems like it's really helping these people out with mental health, as like a processing technique, as a coping mechanism. Not that, for me this sort of thing wouldn't work, and I don't really have any plans on engaging with it, actually writing things myself. But it's fascinating to see how much this is built up. And I think because of that, Shadows House is elevated in my mind even further as like a remarkable and interesting series. But yeah, eventually, once my long manga hiatus is over and I'm back to reading manga, I'm gonna read this one. I think it's gonna be great. Okay, moving on finally to Komi-san. Komi-san wa Komyushou Desu. This, I think, is how you adapt a manga, right? They just knocked it out of the park, and how you localize an anime wrong. I'd say the most common comment I've actually seen about this series, all things considered, it's not about Najumi's gender identity. It's not about is Komi-san an insulting portrayal of people with social anxiety. It's not about is the series funny or is it just obnoxious? Although I've seen a lot of all of those takes. It's about how terrible the official subtitles are. Because a big running gag of the anime is that it still shows manga dialogue bubbles and it still incorporates a lot of like the visual language of manga. And then they don't subtitle and translate the people's dialogue bubbles. And it's like, well, what's the point? As I mentioned, very I it's not a huge problem for me because I can read this shit. Sometimes I have to pause though if there's a lot. I didn't really need it to be subbed, and I had already read the manga, so I kind of knew in most situations roughly what they were talking about. I could work from there. But really, well, what a screw up. I can understand why people were so frustrated with this. At the same time, I can understand why people doing subtitles for like Crunchyroll or no, I guess it was Netflix, were like, what the heck? How do I subtitle this like paragraph of text that just pops up on the screen for like 5 seconds? Where do I put the English words? Where do they fit? How do I convey all of this so quickly? But yeah, putting that aside, moving on from the localization issues, I think this is going to be the new gold standard for adapting rom-coms. I'm retroactively even more disappointed in something like Nagatoro, which was so bog standard and really didn't take very many risks with the adaptation at all. But on the other hand, this show is a big success. People are paying attention to it. People are talking about it. Maybe rom-com adaptations in the future of series I really like Boku Yubai, The Dangers in My Heart, could be excellent. They could hold themselves up to this standard and say, if we're not going to do something as good as Komi-san, there's no point. I don't know. I just absolutely love the way everything in the show is depicted with this barrage, this mixed media barrage of animation and still visual language and like structuring and pacing that you see from manga. And as a Shaft Giga fan, in my mind, this is the evolution of anime. In my mind, this is like a vision of what the unique potential of anime is versus other forms of animation like Pixar 3D CG or like American flash animation kind of stuff. the more anime transcends being just animated live action, like just doing everything you could do in live action, but you animate it, or just everything you could do in CG, but like flattened. Not that there's things that you can't do in CG necessarily, but you know, the more you rely on the fact that this is just a drawing, that you can literally just draw anything onto the frame, and that's what gets animated. There's no situation in a real space. There's no sense of continuity of background necessarily or anything like that. The more anime deviates from anything else and becomes its own thing, the more I like it. So putting aside the characterization, the world building, the comedy, the heartfelt moments, which we talked about at length in our original discussion, I think this would be a solid inclusion in my top 10 just off the strength of this many-faceted, prismatic, brilliant production. I was so impressed. Reminded me of Shaft. That's all it takes. Okay. So yeah, that says a lot. I think the fact that I love this show so much really says a lot about my taste in like production and stuff. And what I want to see in adaptations. Which, you know, isn't going to be true for everyone. I think a lot of people, this sort of style just gives them a headache. And that's reasonable too. Okay. Next we have SSSS.Dynazenon. So if you haven't heard, this is a big announcement a couple months ago. There's going to be a Gridman Dynazenon crossover movie. And the SSSS-verse is getting bundled up much tighter than ever before. I thought they would do this eventually. I thought maybe there would be like a third one first that creates more hints about, you know, continuity between them or character overlap and stuff. I don't want to spoil it, but Dynazenon has a really weird level of interaction with Gridman. But now I feel like it's going to be much more explicit and much more obviously connected. And it's happening really a lot sooner. I thought they would kind of build out this SSSS-verse a little more. So yeah, I'm sure this is going to be mind-bogglingly hype, eye-blowingly well-produced. There's going to be big, gigantic robot fights, even Promare, which I think is kind of currently triggers high watermark for this kind of production in the theater. They're going to go even further beyond, I think. But at the same time, I don't think a movie is really going to capture what I love so much about this series. Like, you know, the robot versus kaiju fight plots can really easily translate into a crossover movie, and it will kick ass. That's for sure. Like, don't get me wrong. I really want to see Gridman and Dynazenon, you know, and Grid Knight and stuff. They're all teaming up and fighting a gigantic, unprecedented threat. That's awesome, sure. And I think the human casts interacting is going to be really fun too. It doesn't really have to be substantial for it to be really entertaining and compelling, you know. The characters are so well-defined and so entertaining on their own that the interactions really just write themselves. Really? I just want to see more of my beloved Caliber from Gridman. I love that character so much. Samurai Caliber. He's so great. I would watch an entire series just about him. But how will they capture things, the drifting bleakness, the ennui, that heavy lived-in tranquility? These are the things that made these series so special to me in the first place. I think, you know, it's kind of weird because I feel like all the human characters had really well-done arcs by the end of their respective series. That even if the lore around the robots and kaiju and stuff started getting a little murky, the path of the characterization I thought was like really fantastic. And I don't need to see these characters again. I was happy with, you know, that being their conclusion, their realization, their finishing point. So the idea of like trotting them out for maybe like 10 minutes screen time total in this movie, I don't know. I'm scared. It could undermine how well these arcs were done. It seems very unnecessary. And you know, this isn't me just being a hater. It's not like I'm poo-pooing any of these ideas. It's just that the human element in the originals of these series was so strong that I can't help but be worried because generally you can't make things that good. The return to mean phenomenon I makes me think this is kind of unnecessary. At the same time, I'm really hyped. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, moving on. Next at number 4, we have Odd Taxi. This kind of blew up. The series kind of took over, which is surprising. This I think was one of the most discussed shows of this year. I don't have like the most general scope on anime discourse or anything. I see what I see and I hear what I hear. But from what I saw and heard, it felt like everybody was watching this. Everybody was talking about it. And before it started, this was insanely low profile. I watched it on a total whim, just because, you know, I had the time to watch a bunch of shows at that time. I think I watched like 7 shows that season. But like, it was right at the bottom of Annie chart. Nobody was talking about it. Nobody had favorited it. Nobody was hyped at all. And yet it was so backed up. Like the PR around it and stuff, once it started airing, the TV show. Of course the TV show. Sorry, I'm like so brain dead today. The website, I mean, that had like character charts and stuff on it. They had the radio show that was running in parallel and had kind of like insider info and secret plot lines and stuff. They really seemed to be ready for it to be this success, even though the success also seemed to come out of nowhere and couldn't possibly have been expected. And now there's going to be a movie. But we spent the whole last slide talking about movies, and this is one I feel totally fine about the movie. I think that fits quite well. But it all blew up for a good reason. There's a reason this became such a wildfire crossover hit. This is hands down my... Even if you don't like anime, you could like this show of the year. The next 3 on this list definitely don't fall into that category. I'm probably even going to try to get my dad to watch it. My dad is a big fan of kind of like prestige TV. He likes mystery series. He likes movies with a lot of tension. I see every reason for him to like this. That's how good it is. It's not just good, you know, if you like anime. It's not just good for the reasons that anime is good. It's good just as very solid storytelling. I would describe this as a paranoia mystery, where more and more I associate this series with a non-fetishy, non-obtuse version of Thomas Pynchon's writing, and where they overlap is this idea of the paranoid mystery. It makes me want a Pynchon anime adaptation. Not that I necessarily think Pynchon is well suited for adaptations at all. In fact, I think the opposite. I think it would be a disaster on a lot of levels. But the fervor that generates as an anime is airing, the communal discussion and speculation, is second to none in any medium. So to see someone, to see a community try to work through the mysteries of The Crying of Lot 49, for example, probably his most adaptable work, sounds fantastic, even if the show itself would be kind of weird. The feeling of not knowing where the connections are, what's coincidence and what's conspiracy, it's really intoxicating. And then, as I said, that radio show that was airing in parallel, that explained some of the mysteries of the series that at first you might think were just a little joke, just a little visual gag. I don't want to spoil what I'm talking about here if you haven't seen it, but like, to know that actually was all planned, to know that they actually had this depth of knowledge, these hidden underground connections to everything they were doing, it really explains why it's so good, that they had prepared for this level of analysis. Okay. Moving on to number 3, we have the Pretty Boy Detective Club. We talked about this show a lot before. I don't really know what's left for me to say about it. In other movie news, Shaft is making a proper Madoka sequel movie, a sequel to the Rebellion movie. which came out in like 2013. So for some reason, 10 years later, by the time it comes out, they've decided to try again, to continue the Madoka franchise after I think a lot of the spin-offs and the Mobage and the Mobage's anime might not be giving them the returns they wanted. I'm kind of skeptical. I wasn't a huge fan of Magia Record, to say the least. It felt very, very unnecessary and cash grabby, and very transparently just an adaptation of a Mobage. And I tried watching Magia Record 2, and that was almost even worse because they did the opposite, and right from the start, they were trying to involve itself in the lore of the original and kind of tie it in with little gaps in the plot of the original series. It felt sacrilegious. It felt like a very desperate attempt to make me care on the level of lore when they had already lost me on the level of characterization and production and stuff. No, not even production. The production was good too, but it wasn't enough. So I don't know. Like, is this movie going to continue this integration of the expanded Madoka universe into the continuing plotline of the main series? I don't like that. I mean, I'm gonna see it no matter what, but like, I'm getting a little worried. And I was like, yo, Shaft is back, Shaft is back. Clearly all the directors and producers I like were involved in this because it's so in line with what I loved about the Monogatari style. I was so excited. Maybe they're going to do more Pretty Boy Detective Club. Maybe they're even going to start adapting Monogatari again. It felt like the possibilities were endless. But so far, nothing has come. So far, the only project we know in the Shaft pipeline is the Strike Witches spinoff. So, like, is Shaft actually back? Or perhaps there's an easier explanation. The Pretty Boy Detective Club was actually made like years ago, before the mass exodus of Shaft. And for some reason, they just chose to release it in 2021. I don't know. I'm sure I could find this out. The production history of anime is usually pretty well documented. At this point, via various connections, I could probably just talk to somebody that actually worked on the show. But like, I don't know. I don't want to know. I think the Occam's razor answer here is to say, yeah, this is actually just an old show. Shaft will continue not making anything like this. They actually made this in like 2017. I don't know. Like, I could probably investigate this a lot more, but I'm a bit scared at what I might find. But instead, I will just celebrate and enjoy that at the very least we got one new Shaft show that represents everything I like about Shaft. Well, after I had given up all hope on the studio, it's almost absurd how accurately it had followed my taste from when I was watching Monogatari. Like I started watching Monogatari, over 10 years ago now. And since I first became invested in the series, my tastes in a lot of things have changed. What was interesting to me about the show most has changed. And I felt like this show tracked all of those changes to my current appreciation of the Monogatari series and just gave me exactly that. Has Nisei Oyasin been reading my dreams? Does he know even better what I want than me? And, I don't need a show like this every season. I don't even need a show like this every year. It's so dense and complex, like I can savor these 12 episodes for years. Or maybe forever, if that's the case. But at least they gave us this. At least I have it to savor. And in case nothing else is coming. Okay. Next we have Kobayashi-san's Dragon Maid S. Kobayashi-san Shino Maid Dragon S. The second season of Maid Dragon. Since we last talked about the show in the seasonal review, it's taken on kind of a second life in my consciousness, where it's become the quintessential meme of like a pervert anime for perverts among this one friend group I'm in on like the Discord server. whenever they talk about such pervert shows, this is the show that is exemplified, that they post GIFs from, GIFs of silly boob gags and stuff from the series. And they're not wrong about any of this. All of this stuff is in the show. All of the qualities that they've either witnessed or extrapolated, just assumed, they're completely right. It is the exact pervert show they expect it is. But despite this accurate mockery, despite the fact that my adoration for this series has probably sacrificed any remaining social capital I had with these people, my love for the show hasn't diminished at all. I think this is a great example of a feedback loop of negative social capital media. Top of the list, of course, being otaku anime, but there's a lot of negative social capital media, things that by watching them and saying you watch them and saying you enjoy them, you actually become less cool, less creditable, less interesting, and less acceptable in the eyes of the general public. So you think other people simply don't get it. They simply can't. Only by being deep into otakuism do you gain the ability to comprehend, let alone appreciate something like this. And what it really is kind of like a desensitization. That the things that were once so appalling or giving you some sort of extreme reaction eventually just become part of the landscape. They become genre conventions so route that they don't even shock you, or break you out of your appreciation for the other elements of the show. Like we talked about in the original discussion, this show primarily appeals to me on like an emotional sentimental level and on the level of production. But if you're so unexperienced with the idea of like a pervert show for perverts, you won't be able to get over the fact that it's just a pervert show for perverts, to be able to judge it on what distinguishes it from other pervert shows for perverts. And it becomes even more special to you because of that. Not just despite the scorn of others, but partially because they don't understand. And that this show, you can perceive now that your love for it is kind of like a reward for suffering through so many other much crappier pervert shows for perverts. This is the way of the otaku. You dig yourself so deep into something that you find what in your eyes is gold, and you return to the surface and everyone says, that gold is covered in crap. Or they say, why are you holding a ball of crap? And if you say, yo, I'm pretty sure there's gold in here, they don't know, because they haven't been digging in crap all day. All right. So yeah, if you want to understand though, if you want to be among the people that knows why this show is so remarkable and so beloved by this niche of people, you can watch my seasonal anime review on it. I cover it in some depth. Okay. La 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 la. At number 1 though, of course, beating out Maid Dragon Season 2 is Yuru Camp Season 2. Sometimes I think that my love for slice of life anime is fading a little bit. It's not at its peak. Because I used to rewatch episodes of Hidamari Sketch all the time. If I was having a bad depressive episode, I would just lie in bed watching Hida Sketch or some other slice of life show, but most often Hida Sketch because it's my favorite. I would watch every like moe hobby-based show every season. Now I watch like maybe one a season. Sometimes not even that. I would buy hella merch of all these shows, all these characters. You can remember my small army of Nendroids. I would read doujinshi, not lewd doujinshi, of course, but like Yuri doujinshi about the characters confessing their love for one another, having cute little romantic dates and stuff. I just really wanted to immerse myself in the world of these slice of life series as much as possible. I think more than my tastes changing, it's more my mental health situation changing that's made me not as fanatical about these. I wouldn't say my mental health is necessarily better overall, Like, it probably is at least a bit. But it's certainly very, very different. The sorts of things that bother me now versus the things that bothered me back then. The sorts of things that I would obsess over, or the things that would lead me to wanting to be in bed all day, and therefore the things that would help me get out of bed, are very, very different. And now I feel like this healing factor of these slice of life shows, the legendary... Dude, my mind? I gotta take a nap or something. It's like I can talk fairly normally, because I can talk kind of automatically. But then when I have to think of like a particular word... Kumiko! Kumiko is the name of the character in Hidamari's sketch. Oh, and Hibike Euphonium, I mean. Oh my god! My ability to recall, because now I can't think of the word for healing. And I'm gonna think of that like half an hour later. Anyways, I feel like, it doesn't do it for me anymore. It's not enough to make me feel kind of like comforted as it used to. And maybe that's partially because it isn't necessary, because, I've kind of internalized that comfort and warmth on a way that I hadn't before. But when I watch like a really, really good slice of life show like this, a masterpiece among the genre, I feel this lingering warmth. And I remember when those shows were such a great emotional support for me. And they also provided a gateway for me to understand how much I wanted feelings that now I have partially... Dang, I must have made these slides when I was sleep deprived too. This should say gateway to feelings that I longed for. And then I guess I decided to put partially in parentheses, but I didn't remove this partially. Oh, what a train wreck. This is why people edit their YouTube videos. But yeah, that now that I kind of have achieved some of the things that I really fantasized about while I was watching Slice of Life, I still credit, I think, Slice of Life to helping me realize how important those sorts of feelings would be for me. And I realize that other people are maybe having that love awakened in them with Yuru Camp, with this season of Yuru Camp. Like right now, with every episode, I can feel through the monitor, through the internet, that potential. And I know that if I ever become that old type of depressed again, instead of this exciting new type of depressed, that these sorts of shows will still be there for me, that I can return to them anytime, and that they will probably provide the comfort that they once did in that new absence. It's really lovely. Okay, we got through it. I got very distracted and unfocused at times. I'm not really sure why. I think I'm just more tired than I thought I was. I didn't sleep as much as I normally do last night, so it could be that. Maybe I'll take a nap. But yeah, really, really good year of anime. I didn't watch as much in the last two seasons as I did the first two, but the shows I did see I really liked. And I don't know, I think saying that 2021 was one of the best years for anime like ever isn't a controversial take. So we'll see what 2022 brings. I'm really excited. We'll do seasonal anime reviews again. I really enjoy doing that. And yeah, please join me as we explore this wonderful medium. Okay, bye.